For the first time in over 4 decades, American and Iranian officials sat across the same table. No intermediaries, no back channels, no deniability. In Islamabad, under tight security and global scrutiny, two nations locked in hostility since 1979 took a step that could reshape the Middle East, or collapse just as quickly as it began. The question now isn't just what happened inside those talks, it's whether this fragile breakthrough can survive what comes next. To understand the magnitude of this moment, you have to go back to 1979, the year diplomatic relations between the United States and Iran were severed following the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis. Since then, engagement has been indirect at best. Negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, especially during the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, relied heavily on intermediaries and multilateral frameworks. But Islamabad changed that. This was the first confirmed instance of direct face-to-face negotiations between senior U.S. and Iranian officials in over 45 years. That alone marks a structural shift in diplomacy between the two countries. The composition of the delegations signals how seriously both sides are treating this moment. On the U.S. side, Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Senior Advisor Jared Kushner. On the Iranian side, Speaker Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. This wasn't a symbolic meeting. It was a high-level negotiation involving individuals with direct access to executive decision-making. One of the most overlooked but crucial aspects of these talks is the location, Islamabad. Pakistan acted as a neutral facilitator, leveraging its diplomatic ties with both Washington and Tehran. Unlike traditional mediators such as European states or Gulf countries, Pakistan offered a unique combination: strategic credibility with the U.S., geographic and political proximity to Iran, and a vested interest in regional stability. By hosting the talks, Pakistan positioned itself as a key diplomatic broker in a region increasingly defined by shifting alliances. According to multiple diplomatic briefings, Iran entered the talks with 4 core demands it considers non-negotiable: full removal of U.S. economic sanctions, recognition of its right to civilian nuclear enrichment, security guarantees against military action, and non-interference in regional alliances, particularly in Lebanon and Syria. These demands reflect Iran's long-standing strategic priorities: economic relief, sovereignty, and regional influence. At the center of the negotiation lies one of the most contentious issues: nuclear enrichment. The United States insists on strict limits to prevent Iran from reaching weapons-grade enrichment levels. Iran, on the other hand, maintains that its program is purely civilian and insists on its sovereign right under international law. The current gap is significant. The U.S. wants enrichment capped at low levels with intrusive inspections. Iran seeks broader flexibility and fewer restrictions. This issue remains one of the largest obstacles to any long-term agreement. Another major point of tension is Lebanon. The United States has expressed concern over Iran's support for armed groups in the region, particularly Hezbollah. Iran, however, views these alliances as essential to its regional security architecture. In Islamabad, discussions reportedly became tense around this issue, with neither side willing to concede ground. This indicates that even if a nuclear compromise is reached, regional proxy dynamics could still derail broader normalization. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical energy choke points, also featured prominently in the talks. Roughly 20% of global oil shipments pass through this narrow waterway, making stability here a global economic priority. Iran has historically used the threat of disruption in the strait as leverage, while the U.S. maintains a strong naval presence to ensure free passage. In Islamabad, both sides discussed mechanisms to avoid naval escalation and establish communication channels to prevent miscalculations. While no formal agreement was announced, this dialogue alone reduces immediate risk. Despite deep disagreements, the talks did produce tangible outcomes. A 2-week ceasefire framework aimed at reducing immediate regional tensions, agreement to continue direct negotiations without intermediaries, initial steps towards confidence-building measures, including humanitarian exchanges and limited economic relief discussions, and establishment of a joint communication channel to manage potential incidents. These are not final agreements, but they are foundational steps. At the same time, several critical issues remain unresolved. Final terms of sanctions relief, verification mechanisms for nuclear compliance, Iran's regional military and political activities, and long-term security guarantees. In other words, the hardest parts of the negotiation are still ahead. The 2-week ceasefire isn't a solution, it's a test. If it holds, it could pave the way for extended negotiations, build trust between both sides, and reduce pressure from global markets and regional actors. If it collapses, it risks triggering renewed escalation, undermines diplomatic momentum, and reinforces decades of mistrust. The next phase will likely involve follow-up meetings, possibly expanding to include additional stakeholders, depending on progress. The Islamabad talks mark a rare moment in international diplomacy, when long-standing adversaries choose dialogue over confrontation. But history shows that initial breakthroughs don't guarantee lasting peace. What happens next will depend on whether both sides are willing to move beyond symbolic gestures and confront the deeper structural conflicts that have defined their relationship for nearly half a century. Because in geopolitics, the real test isn't starting talks, it's surviving them. If you want clear, fact-based analysis on the world's most critical geopolitical fault lines, subscribe to Fault Lines World. Because understanding global power isn't an option anymore. It's essential.